Welcome to the For Real Though Show, the podcast with the purpose for the people. I am your host, Christopher Keith. This is a different show today, but it's also a show that solidifies what I want this platform to be about. So thank you for being with us. Around 24 people per minute are victims of physical violence, rape, or stalking by an intimate partner in the United States. This accounts for over 12 million men and women a year. Annually, domestic violence causes over 1,500 deaths and 2 million injuries just in the United States. Almost 85% of domestic violence victims are women. A woman experiences physical abuse every 9 seconds. So those are just statistics, but when I think about all the women in my family that I can think of, some families are smaller than others. Mine is relatively small. I can count on one hand those who haven't had either physical, sexual, or mental violence thrust upon them. Now,
Yeah.
mother, I got one sister, a niece, three daughters, three granddaughters. So those who haven't experienced any violence from men is a rarity.
Yeah.
How does one deal with that pain and stress of being attacked? Why is it difficult for many women to leave their abusers? How does one regain confidence afterwards, after leaving that kind of situation? What if the scars are not just emotional, but also physically apparent for all to see? Our guest, Miss Mullins, and her name is really Miss, is a violence survivor. We met and became friends working together in the men's basketball league for the city of Columbus. I've always been impressed with her attitude, her resilience, and months ago asked if she would share her testimony. I also saw her on the news recently working with some women in this area, so we'll talk about that. Recently, she reached out and agreed, and for that, I am very thankful. So, Miss, thank you for being here. Please tell us what happened in your situation.
Well, for me, it was the typical. I realized was the typical because, in all honesty, I didn't realize I was in a domestic violent relationship and marriage until it was over. That I was part of those statistics. And I met my ex down at Central State. He played basketball for them. I was there on campus. We began talking. You know, my everyone was impressed because I had already had a ready-made family. I had twins when I was not quite 20 years old. And so they were two at the time that I met him. And, getting a lot of pressure from my family that I need to settle down
Mhm.
and that type of thing because I partied.
Okay. Okay.
I, I partied hard.
You was about
Because,
that college life.
well, it wasn't even just out that because, like I said, I was 19 when I had them. I turned 20, 3 months later, 4 months later. Uh, and my parents allowed me to kind of get it out my system, to be able to do the things that my friends my age were doing by keeping the kids. You know, um, I had declined going back to school. That's one of my regrets because I had a scholarship waiting for me to go back. I played volleyball in college. Um, After I had the twins, the coach even offered, for me to come back, but I didn't want to put the burden on raising my kids on my parents.
Mhm.
I got a lot of flack about getting pregnant to begin with. That was not supposed to be in my, plan. And so I declined the scholarship. I typed 100 words a minute. I got a job. And so by the time I met my ex, um, he was just that. I guess it's hard for me to see it now. One of my friends was like, "Yes, miss." He was, a very nice looking guy. He was that tall, dark, and handsome basketball player. Um, and we hit it off. He was cool with the ready-made family. The dad loved him. He wanted to pledge my dad's fraternity. He was at my dad's alma mater. It was just okay. And as I put it later on, he was everybody else's choice for me. When my mom told me I was going through boyfriends, like people were going through paper towels and disposing of them just easily, easily. I should have told her to call me Bounty and kept it moving, but I'm like, okay, I'll, settle down, with this person. And it was really good, in the beginning. It was nice to have somebody just all about you and everything. And I just didn't really see the signs. And it does come off as flattery. Later on, it was essentially him isolating me. I've always been an athlete. I've always been, into sports. I literally would schedule my vacation during March Madness so I wouldn't miss a game. Mm. And he knew that about me. But so with that, there also comes the fact that I know a lot of guys. But this is also my hometown. Remember, he was from Chicago. I was the star athlete in my school. My dad knew everybody. He was involved in local politics. There literally isn't a place I could go without seeing somebody I knew.
And you mean in Columbus, Ohio?
Not in Columbus.
Sure. Okay.
And I could go in other states. I remember was in line at Disney World and someone calls out my dad's name. It was like, so he would get upset. I grew up in church. We go to church. Of course, this is my childhood church. You see everybody. You give people hugs at church. That would make him uncomfortable. And so it was just always something that I just started noticing, with how he took issue with, he took issue with the friend of mine that would cut my son's hair. Sorry, he needs his hair cut. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know a female barber, so, and it was just everything. I mean, it was just started to be everything, and it was starting to irritate me. But of course, everyone around me, oh my God, he's so great. Okay. So I will say for a good portion of our relationship and marriage, I really felt like I was the problem. Like I wasn't seeing what everybody else was seeing because I was becoming miserable within the relationship. We get into physical altercations, but I didn't think of me, being that domestic violence victim, because I fought back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You hit me, I'm hitting you. Mm-hmm. Size ain't never intimidated me. My daddy is 6'5", 6'5", and ex football player. Size ain't never intimidated me. And so we get in the shoving matches, and when he would hit me, it was never like I went to work with a busted lip or black eye. He'd hit me in my back, my side, that type of thing, where bruises wouldn't show. Mm-hmm. I had him arrested a few times. And still, but I'd end up dropping him. And keep in mind, I started working for the Supreme Court just a couple years after we started dating. Mm-hmm. And I take that back. It was, started dating in 93, Started there in 98. So yeah. So just a few years after we started dating. So, and I had to work with all the judges in Ohio,
Mhm.
not just the justices. And so for him to show up in court in front of one of the judges I knew was just like embarrassing to me.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And so a lot of times, if he got arrested and had to spend the night, I'd call one of the judges and be like, can you just release him on his own recognizance, and they would, because I had that type of relationship with them. And then I ended up dropping the charges because I didn't want to go through the system. And that was how it played out. Um, we were going to get married. We had planned to get married. Everybody was excited because, from his side of the family, y'all shacking up. From my side of the family, y'all need to settle that. You need to make this official. We getting it from both sides. And then the initial wedding got called off. And then
Was it called off because of the
actually he is the one who called it off.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm ready. Fine. My mind, it was just like, okay.
You thought that was way out.
But then when he went over to play basketball overseas for a little bit, and when he came back, that's when, I missed you. I want us to get married, blah, 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 blah. Okay. We started planning. Then I got pregnant with my youngest son, my middle child. And we decided we would do it after he was born.
Mhm.
Went and got we had went to get the marriage license, everything. We were going to have just like an intimate ceremony with just close family and friends at my, childhood church, that type of thing. I also was looking for a bigger house. I was actually staying in one of the homes that my family had owned when it was just me and the kids and then him. But now we had another one come in and it just wasn't enough.
Mm.
So I was looking for a house and found one. Um, a family friend was looking to sell her house, but she was willing to allow me to rent it from her while I went through the process of, purchasing the home. And keep in mind, I'm 26, 27 at this point. So I was excited for the fact that I was able to be in that position to buy a home at this age
Mhm.
with 3 kids.
Mhm. Mhm.
I took them all up to the house for them to see it. It was great. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, great big backyard, everything, it was perfect. Everybody was going to have their own bedrooms, everything. And we get back to the house. He leaves out. A woman calls the house and asks for him. Okay. Now, we had gone through this before. That was some of the arguments, that
Infidelity.
infidelity on his part.
Mhm.
And it was, but the crazy part about it though is that, see, I'm that person that I would call, he would almost like purposely leave the numbers around the house for me to find. And I'd call them. And I would never be disrespectful for them. That was one thing I was adamant about. I'd just be curious. Well, how'd you meet him? When'd you meet him? How
Mhm.
long you been talking to him? Probably 8 out of 10 would be like, he never called me.
Hmm.
But this one in particular called the house phone. And I answered, but he worked at a hotel, and there would be times he'd accidentally bring keys to home, whatever. On the shift, they call, the employees from the hotel call, looking for him, whatever. So when she called, I didn't think that much about it, just so because as nonchalant she was about asking for him.
Mhm. Mhm.
But when he came back in, and I told him, she even left her name, everything. when I asked if she wanted to leave a message. He walked back in the house. I told him, hey, such and such called, and his face told on him. And I was like, okay. Well, he used to think he could hide this cell phone that he had. This would have been, like I said, 1999. And, back then you couldn't put no passcode or nothing like that on no cell phone or
On the
whatever.
smartphone, yeah.
Yeah. And so I found the phone. Sure enough, there was another voicemail from her in this phone because he came in. It's like, oh, it was one of his friend's girlfriends. Like, why is she calling you then? So I called her. And me and her had a wonderful conversation. And she was telling me how she had met him when he had his son with him. Mind you, this was the son that I had just given birth to. He was 5 weeks old. I was still on maternity leave. And she had met him up at Northland Mall when he had his son with him. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was devastated, to learn. But I'm like, me and him literally just went and got our marriage certificate 3 days prior to this. So I'm pissed because that is my first emotion. Okay. I always joke with people like my crazy is completely authentic. And the fact that I am on maternity leave and I remember there was a time I had to bring my sister over because my son was colicky and I couldn't get no sleep and he's gone. And to come to find out it's because he's gone spending time with this woman. So he comes back in the house, realized I'm talking to her, and I was like, I went after him. And he runs back out the front door. I run after him, and I went to horse collaring and missed the step. Fell and broke my leg. And I didn't just break it, I crushed it. I had to have multiple surgeries on that leg. They said my tibia plateau was in 26, 27 pieces. So I had to spend a week in the hospital, all that. So then I felt like I needed him around. I had a newborn to take. He worked nights. I would essentially, I couldn't even carry my son around by himself. So I needed him to stay around at that point. My twins at this point were 8 years old. Well, I hadn't even quite turned 8 when this happened. And so we stayed together. I was off work instead of 6 weeks of maternity leave. I was off work for 6 months
because of your leg.
Because of my leg. And doctors finally cleared me to go back to work once I got down to one crutch. I guess I was celebrating getting off them crutches too much because I go back to my doctor and they're like, you're pregnant. Okay. So now I'm getting a lot of flack from my family. Like, oh my gosh, you're going to have 4 kids and you're single, just getting a lot of mouth.
Did your family know that you guys were in physical conflict?
Not really. I didn't tell them. Sorry. I was embarrassed. I was the strong one. I was the one that everyone else came to when they had conflict. I was the big sister. I was, like I said, I really didn't even think I was in an abusive relationship, really. That was my mindset at the time because I fought back. That was my mindset. So, but to them, he was the best son-in-law ever in his eyes, in their eyes. And anytime we had conflict, what I got back was, well, what are you doing? I must be the problem because he's wonderful. So that's when I say, when I thought I was the crazy one for most of our relationship, I did.
Mhm.
like I was doing something wrong. And so we got urged to get married when I got pregnant with my youngest. And we did. And because I actually got to the point, I was like, well, I'm going to be a single mother of four or I'm going to be a married mother of four, but this ain't going to do nothing. And I called myself wiping the slate clean as far as anything that had happened, you know, prior to us getting married.
So when you
Because,
say you were wiping the slate clean, excuse me, was that because you thought you had a reason to, like, had the because you're on crutches or your leg was hurt?
well, a
Did,
part
did,
of, I
did
mean, that was the thing. It's like, because it's not like, okay, in my mind, like when I fell down the steps, he didn't push me.
right.
And when I talk about we have these physical altercations, they would be months apart,
Gotcha.
sometimes
Okay, gotcha.
years
Gotcha. Okay, okay,
apart. This
okay.
was not a daily thing that
Hmm.
we did.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they would be months. Sometimes, we would even went a couple of years without there being anything.
So you had reason to think that, yeah, okay, things
I
are,
could
yeah,
we go
something you could point to. Yeah,
yeah.
some space and time. Yeah. Okay.
And so um and it didn't. Even once we got married, there was no physical altercations between us. There was arguing because he always seemed to be out. Now I'm trying to take care of four kids and I didn't bought this house. And when we bought this house, it was supposed to be okay, I'll handle the mortgage, you handle the utilities, but I come home to disconnection notices. And so I got to figure out how to do those. And I'm wondering, what the heck are you doing with your money? So it was other reasons for us to argue,
Right.
you know, that were coming about. I couldn't do anything on my own because that was the other thing I tried to fight for was my independence. I had started bowling. I was a pretty good bowler. In this all women's league, and that was supposed to be my night.
Hmm.
With I actually bowled with my mom. And women that we knew from church and that type of thing. It was literally an all women's league that we bowled in. And he would always have a reason for why him and the kids had to come.
Hmm.
So I couldn't even have that night out. I
Hmm.
couldn't go to the grocery store by myself. He was calling me all, throughout the day when I was at work.
Hmm.
It was exhausting. And I kept on telling me, give me my space or I'm going to take it. And you probably ain't going to like how I take it. So I remember after I had my daughter, we had been married for over a year, sitting outside. It's a beautiful day. His cell phone rings. And he was about to leave, but had went into the house and his cell phone was in the car. And I went to go get the cell phone. And he come busting out the house. And I have not a complete photographic memory, but that's literally how I, got through school. I'd read something, I remember how it is written on the blackboard, whatever. That's how I was an honor student. Now ask me something about it 2 weeks later, I
Right.
can't tell you. But so I had memorized the number that had come up on the phone. I went in the house on the house phone, called the number, come to find out he had met this woman at some club 8 months prior. Um, she was talking about she was going to his job. He would get hotel rooms for her and her friends to hang out. And they had met when? When I was on maternity leave with my daughter.
Mm.
My daughter was just a few weeks old at the time that she said they met. She was Even asked him if he was married because one time he forgot to take off his ring, obviously. And, he, disregarded that. And it's like, okay. And so when I told her, yes, we are, if you want him, I can have his stuff to your house in an hour because I'm done.
Mhm.
And after that, he knew I was done
Mm. Okay.
because I just didn't care anymore what he did. I never questioned anything about what he was doing. I started focusing on me. Keep in mind, I had back-to-back babies and and a broken leg in between. So I had put on all this extra weight. I started getting that weight off. My job was making me miserable. I started looking for another job. Everything. He was the last person I was concerned about.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's when the stalking started. He was literally stalking me in my own home. When I would think he would be away to work, I would call my best friend and me and her would be talking about anything, everything. We've been friends since we were 14. There wasn't too much we wouldn't talk about. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, he's repeating back something part of our conversation.
Mhm.
And I would always wait until he went to work just so I could freely have a conversation, with her. He begged me to go to marriage counseling. We went to marriage counseling. Now, at this time, nothing physical was going on, but we went to marriage counseling. He spent the entire, I think I lasted 4 sessions because he spent every session just talking about what he thought I wanted to hear.
Mm.
And I finally looked at the marriage counselor and was like, what if I just don't want to be married to this MF no more? And, the marriage counselor was this old German guy, and he's like kind of taken aback because I use those colorful words.
Mhm. And he was there when you said that. Your
He,
your ex-husband was there when you
I
said
looked directly at him,
yeah.
and I'm like, I'm wasting my lunch break doing this. This is just a waste of my time.
Mhm.
And so he couldn't get the rise out of me. I wasn't arguing with him no more. I just didn't care.
Which took a lot of that power away from him.
Exactly. And so this went on, like I said, this would have been like 2001. So 2003, that's when I think I found 2002, I found another job. 2003, I ended up deciding I missed the legislature. I went back to the legislature, and still, I'm not concerned about him. There were still numbers being left around the house strategically. I'd leave them right where they were.
Mhm.
And, and but I'm also still stressed because I felt like I was having to carry the entire load of the family,
Sure.
everything. I remember the refrigerator stopped working in the house, and he's calling me at work asking me what I should do. I don't know, go get another refrigerator. I mean, it was just like, or call a repair guy. Can't you have a independent thought?
Like you got
And
5 kids instead of 4.
yes, that's exactly how I
Yeah,
felt.
I got you. Yeah.
That is literally how I would explain it to my best friend, that I felt like I had 5 kids
Mhm.
and I was completely stressed. I was coaching track, and he would come out to, I'd be at a track meet. And I remember there was one time, me and a coach, I was working the long jump pit, and me and another coach were measuring the long jump, and he come marching across the field. I guess me and this coach got too close to each other. What's going on here? Dude, if you don't get off this field, I didn't even care how it looked to other people anymore.
Mm.
I'm trying to work. Go up, back up in the stands. Why are you here? It was just whatever. Um, and so he just couldn't get that rise out of me anymore. There was also the intimacy between us was nil. Um, of course, I didn't want this man touching me. I was literally, thinking about how I could kill him in his sleep some days. I was just mad all the time. And then, not even realizing until my doctor put me on antidepressants, depressed.
Mm.
I'm getting a lot of flack from my parents. My mom would come over to the house, talk about how junky the house was, never taking into consideration that I might just be depressed. I would isolate myself in my room just to have time to myself.
And all of your family still assumed that you were doing great because
Yeah.
he's a great guy.
We got the house, we got the kids, we got the pool in the backyard, we got this, we got that. It was just and I did put on a very good front because it was an ego thing for me.
Mm. Mm.
I'm not this person. I'm not in no abusive relationship. I'm Miss.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I didn't share with them the craziness, the stalking, the calling me 20 times a day at work. I didn't share that with my family. I was embarrassed by that.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the one best friend I would talk to, she was in town. Me and her decided to go out, have some drinks. Of course, just me and her. Well, he convinced my cousin that he needed to go out. And they essentially were trying to figure out where me and her were because me and her went all over the place. We were club hopping, different places. Like I said, she was in town, just for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up finding us at the club. It wasn't like I was hiding, it was or anything. I was actually happy when he got there because I was like, oh, good, I got a dance partner.
Mm.
Not really thinking anything about it. We saw some guy we knew that went to school with us. We sat and talked all night. When we got home, we had exchanged numbers. Let's say this was an old classmate.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a reunion. We were talking about planning a reunion. So he's like, y'all let me know. So we all exchanged numbers. Well, he ended up calling my phone when we got home that night. Me, my cousin, my best friend, and my ex were all sitting in our living room just chatting it up. This is like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. But this guy calls and, I answer my phone. I step just out in the hallway, just out, like really in the doorway of the living room. And this was the friend, the class, former classmate was like, hey, I'm just calling to make sure you guys got home okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, we're all sitting here talking in the living room. He's like, all right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. That was the conversation. My best friend decided she was going to stay the night. My ex-husband went on into our bedroom. Unbeknownst to me, he had grabbed my cell phone. I got her settled in, living room. I walked into our bedroom. He comes at me, hands around my throat. And I was taken aback because at this point, it had been like a couple of years before any physical thing had happened. This is 2005. So it'd been some years since anything physical had happened. And because I was adamant once I bought my house that I was not dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, he came at me, hands around my throat, and I was completely taken aback because one, what set him off? I'm completely in the dark. But as usual, our bedroom, then dining room turned into a WWF match. You ain't just gonna come at me like this and think I ain't gonna fight back. So we wrestling around. It, spills into the dining room. We wake up, my best friend, she comes in, she's separating us. The kids are now awake. They're, police get called. They call my dad and my mom, who also worked for the police department at the time. everything. The police get there. My best friend's yelling at my ex yelling back at her, and I'm just standing there staring him down. And I was like, oh yeah, um, you tripping. You tripping. And the police officer, what is your problem yelling at me? And I like yelled back at the police officer, like, what the F is your problem? Next thing I know, I'm put in handcuffs. My dad gets there. My dad goes into the house because they put me in the back of the paddy wagon. My dad gets there. They go into the house. So of course he has my dad's ear first. She had some man calling here in the middle of the night. My best friend's like, he was hitting her, that type of thing.
Right.
And so they let my dad come out in the paddy wagon, come back. My dad's like, what went on? I told him, he put his hands on me, Daddy. He got to go. He has to go. My dad is right at the edge of defending him. At the sense of, well, he said some man calling you, Daddy, I don't care. He put his hands on me.
Right.
And all in all, I put him out that night. Because I was getting so frustrated with my dad. I was like, tell them to come on, take me downtown. I know every judge down there. I'll be out by Monday. I was ready to go. And he's like, they ain't arresting you. They're just trying to defuse it. I'm like, get him out my house. Because they will arrest me for what I do to him if I go back in that house and he's still in there. So he wouldn't stay with my dad for a few days. My dad brings him back to the house. Like that Tuesday, wanting to talk with us to see whether or not we're going to work this out. Daddy, I don't know if I'm prepared to go to jail. But I don't think I done thought about is how I'm going to kill him these last few days. I'm beyond if I'm going to. I'm trying to figure out what's the most pleasurable way for me to kill him. So at one point, I was like, Daddy, I studied serial killers and I done came down to 3 options. And 2 of them I can get to him before you move up off that couch. And at that point, my dad's like, yeah, I think we need to go. Couple days later, he calls me, you really don't want to work this out? Dude.
He is in your bed. Yeah. Okay.
And he's like, well, if you don't want to work things out, I'm going back to Chicago. I'm like, let me call you back. About 30, 45 minutes later, I called him back. There's a Greyhound ticket waiting for you. Have your stuff out my house before I get home from work. He moved back to Chicago. This is in March of 2005. He moves back to Chicago. Initially, he's talking about he can't find a job there, all this other type of stuff. I found out later from his sister that was a lie. But he convinced me to allow him to move back to Columbus. But I'm like, you can stay with my dad. You can't stay here. But then he made up some incident where talking about somebody broke into my dad's house and threatened to pour kerosene over him if they didn't give him the drugs and money. My dad was a deacon in the church. There was no reason for them, yes, he lived in a, pretty nice neighborhood, but nothing about my dad's house says we got drugs and money here.
Right.
And then, like I said, the whole kerosene thing. And me being me, didn't want my dad to have to deal with his craziness. Because also during this time, he threatened told me he had taken a bunch of pills. And so I had to take him down. It was like, well, I take that back. That had happened before. And I took him down to Grand Hospital and they put him on a hold. And this was years prior to this. And I was like, I don't want my parents to have to deal with his craziness. I'm the one who married him.
Mm.
So I let him come back home for a little bit. That lasted maybe 2 weeks. I'm like, you got to go. You got to go back to Chicago.
Mm.
Don't come back here until I tell you it's safe, because I'm still literally thinking about killing you.
Mm.
That fall, he started coming back because he was like, the boys is back playing football. I want to be there for the games. But at this point, I had to give up my house. So this is the other stipulation behind women getting out. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
Everything need to be repaired around the house. When I tried to file for a loan to get things repaired, I knew I would be inside out with my mortgage, if I ever went to sell the house. And honestly, I didn't want to be there anymore because it was like the house of terrors at this point.
A lot of bad memories, yeah.
A lot of bad memories. So my mom convinced me that me and the kids should move in with her. That was the very last thing I wanted to do. Now I had to give up my independence in my home that I've worked hard to buy on my own. And I got to move in with my mom with my 4 kids in a 3-bedroom house.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So that was a lot to take in. And then at one point he came into town and, he started questioning everything, because I ain't gonna lie, I felt like I had been paroled. Once he moved back to Chicago, I was back on every VIP list at every club
Mm-hmm.
in Columbus. I didn't have to worry about the kids because they were there with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always
freedom.
yes. I had a co-worker. She was going through a breakup too. That was a few years younger than me, so she knew where everything was. At that point, I hadn't been out in the club in years, and I had a ball. I would come
It's the
home.
Miss Comeback Tour.
Yes, it's exactly
Yeah.
yeah. That's exactly what it was, and I was loving every bit of it.
Sure.
But then I found out, he would start calling my mom and my sister because, of course, he didn't like me going out. Oh, I was on the market again. It was like, but he would be calling my mom and my sister, about me going out. My mom's like, she grown and the kids are here with me. So
mm-hmm.
It ain't even like she ain't taking care of them. She still, make sure their uniforms is ready, feeds them dinner before,
Mm-hmm.
you don't go out till 10 o'clock at night. They in bed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so he wasn't getting that out. But then he was also telling my mom or my sister, why her she doing drugs? That was not my, that was not my thing. She doing ecstasy. That was really not my thing. But he also had my mom's ear still.
Mm.
In that sense of, we trying to work things out, but, she won't, whatever. And, it was really hard for me because, once again, my mom never asked me. She just took his word that we were trying to work things out. I was the last thing I was doing. I was trying to figure out how I was going to navigate in a 1-income household, raising 4 kids.
But your mother did know that y'all had all these physical altercations by this time, right? Because of what
At
happened
this
with
time,
dad.
Physical altercation that had happened. But keep in mind, remember, my dad, he got my dad's ear about a man calling me in the middle of the night. What he did was that he took my phone in the bedroom, called the number back, just heard a man's voice, didn't ask who it was, and he would have found out it was the man that sat across for you for 2 hours at the club.
Mm-hmm. Not that it would have made a difference, I don't think.
That was just it. But that only some man called.
Yeah.
Okay. So my mom knew at this point, because there was a time I remember calling them like, I need to get out of this. But no one would ever, I didn't want to go into detail of why I needed to get out of it. But I don't think they would be like, he's great. He fixes, he cleans, he cooks, he does this, whatever.
Do you think you would have told her if she asked you at
I
that
did at
time?
one point.
Okay. Okay.
And, it was still, they were it was an isolated incident.
Okay.
And it was like, okay. And when he started coming into town, I still was doing my own thing.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize he was looking at the phone records. Remember how when you used to get the phone bill, it had every
Yes. Yep. Hmm.
call. He started looking at my phone bill when he would come into town. He started calling every number that he saw that I talked to frequently.
Hmm.
And I did have one friend that I talked to frequently, but me and him had gone on like 2 dates and
Sure.
realized we were better off as friends.
Sure. Hmm.
I was trying to get rid of a man. I was not trying to find one.
Not that that would have made a difference at that point, but okay.
But and at this point, we had been, separated a year.
Hmm.
And but then crazy stuff started happening. He's still calling me 20 times a day at work. I was out one night. He was there for the weekend. I go to this reggae club that I would go to on Sunday nights. And I come home the next morning. Well, I think it was like a holiday weekend because that's usually when I would go, just on a holiday weekend. And I had just bought this van. And somebody spray painted, "Stop fucking with my man, bitch," on the side of my brand new van. And I'm like, who am I supposed to be messing around with?
Mm.
And he was there that weekend.
Hmm.
So he saw this.
Hmm.
And none of us ever thought it was him.
Mm.
I start calling all the guy friends that I had saw at the reggae club. You got some crazy chick thinking
Right, 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 right.
ready to follow me home, because no one knew I lived with my mom. I never shared anything like that with anybody. No one know where I live. I didn't bring people to the house. I'm like, you. And I start calling everybody. Filed the police report, filed the insurance claim. They were like, there's no damage. You could get it detailed. But a maintenance guy at work was like, you just go get this. That'll clean it off. Don't file no claim. Cleaned off my car. But the very next weekend, I'm out on a hunt trying to figure out what crazy woman then spray painted my car. A couple weeks later, my son had an AAU tournament, and somebody had ran into my van. And it was drivable, but I didn't want to take it on the road.
Sure. Hmm.
This was a Friday morning. I was on my way to work. I was supposed to leave to go to Cincinnati for an AAU tournament. I had a bunch of money tied up in hotel rooms because I was team mom.
Hmm.
So I really couldn't afford to get a rental on my own, and the insurance company wasn't going to come out until Monday to assess the claim. And so he volunteered to drive down from Chicago, and we just take his car because I actually helped him get his car,
Hmm.
a new car when after this was while we were separated, and he drove down to Chicago. We went down to Cincinnati. He got upset because I didn't want to sleep in the same bed with him. I had a room with a king size bed and a sofa bed. I said him and my son could have this king size bed. I'll take the sofa bed. And so he had an attitude about that all weekend. We get back in town. Well, I'm just gonna go back. Usually he would wait till like early Monday morning to leave, to get home just time. He usually had to be at work at like 11 or 12 o'clock at the job he had. And he was a manager at Menards there in Chicago. And this was before we even had the Menards here. But he would usually just wait till early morning and just to go straight to work. But this time it was Sunday night. He decides he's going to leave. Bye. So then he starts calling me. I'm tired At this point, I had called a friend talking about my crazy weekend. This is the guy that I had gone out on a couple of dates with, but we determined we were better as friends.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I didn't told him about the craziness with the spray painting, all this other type of stuff. We're sitting outside of his shop talking, just sitting in my car talking, because I'd actually kept my old van. And so now I'm driving that while the new van is sitting in the carport for the insurance people to come. Me and him were talking. My ex starts calling me. I'm getting sleepy. Well, if you're getting sleepy, pull over to the side of the road or to a rest stop and go to sleep. Didn't nobody tell you to leave? Well, he gets upset. Finally, I turn off my phone. After me and my friend are finished talking, I'm like, let me get home. I start heading home, and he only lived like 5 minutes from my mom. I mean, his shop was like 5 minutes from my mom's house.
Mm-hmm.
Then I remember, oh crap, I turned off my phone. I turned on my phone. I got 8 voicemail messages from my ex. The last one, right as I'm about to pull up to the alley, my mom had a detached garage. And right as I'm about to pull up to pass the alley, I hear this voicemail. You need to get your ass home. Somebody done set your van on fire. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm driving. And sure enough, I see all the fire trucks and sirens and everything else like that, lights down towards where my mom's garage is. I get there, my new van has been completely demolished and also spray painted on the side of the garage and on the back door. Stop effing with my man. So now my parents think I got some crazy woman after me.
Mm-hmm.
They put me on lockdown. I cannot go out. I can only go to work. And the only reason I can go to work is because state troopers, you know, um, guard our building.
Mm-hmm.
I am required to call my dad when I leave the house, when I get to work, and vice versa on my way home. Me and my mom are now arguing because my mom thinks I'm trying to protect some man.
Mm. Wow.
And I'm like, Mom, I have no idea who this is. I haven't even talked to anybody. I have no idea who this is or who this could be. But me and her, and I'm getting irritated because it's like insulting that you thinking I'm protecting somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, my dad's like, you know what? Won't you and the kids come stay with me? You and your mom need a break from each other. So we all load up and move in with my dad. My brother, his wife, and his son are already living with my dad because he just got home from deployment.
Okay.
Oh, it's very crowded in this 2,000 square foot house,
Right. Yeah.
you know. But we made it work.
Mm-hmm.
And um, within a couple of weeks of me staying there, this is like July. All of a sudden, my dad's like, Miss, you should go out. Okay. You're gonna get an argument out of me. I
Mm-hmm.
call my girlfriend, where are we going?
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we ended up just going out to this club, and we didn't stay there long because this was like Tuesday night. I finally got a new van after I went through the whole insurance claim and everything else like that. I finally got a new van that Saturday. This is a Tuesday. Me and her meet. I actually put a load of laundry in the dryer. We meet, have a drink. I get back home, the dryer is still running. So that should give you an idea of how
Mm-hmm.
long I was gone.
Sure.
I go to bed, get up the next morning to my mom, my second mom, my stepmom, waking me up saying, Miss, somebody done vandalized your van again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, my new van?
Mm-hmm.
Don't nobody know I live here. I
Mm-hmm.
told nobody that I moved with
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
my ex. And this time a letter is left. in the windshield, folded up, put underneath the windshield wiper. I open up the letter. I read it. I give it back to my dad. I'm like, Daddy, I got to get to work. But now I got to go to Walmart to get goof off to get this because now bitch is written all over my new van. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm going to go up here and get this goof off to clean off my van because I actually got to drop it back off at the dealer and a coworker is meeting me there because it was something wrong with the video player inside the van. And I'm running late. I get to work. My dad calls me. He's like, you know who it is, don't you? I was like, yeah, Daddy, it's Derek. Mm-hmm. And he was like, how'd you know? I was like, the letter. The letter was all over the place. I know where your kids go to school. Of course, you know where our kids go to school. I wear something with their school name on it regularly. Everybody knew where my kids. I coached where my kids went to school. Everybody, But he started talking about, I know what clubs you go to. And he started naming clubs in Columbus, and then he messed up and named the club in Chicago. Mm. And, the man you messing with is HIV positive. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it was just all over the place. Mm-hmm. But I met him when he was still in college, remember? And I used to help him write his term papers. Mm-hmm. So he would write in what I called Alabama English. Mm-hmm. And in that sense where he had a tendency to, when he would write, mix up the tense of words. Mm-hmm. Or omit a word while he was writing. Gotcha. And he didn't talk like that, that used to always mind boggle me. He didn't talk that way, but when he would write, it would be like that. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was him just off the tone of the letter. Mm-hmm. And so my dad called me. He was like, Miss, don't tell him. Don't tell him. He's like, there was another letter left at your mom's house. Pretty much saying the same thing. But they never told me about that letter. But this was also around the time my dad was like, why don't you come up and stay with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I was like, okay. And he's like, don't tell him it's him. We just gone this. Only thing. So he actually called me that morning. Well, I hope nothing happens to this van. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I said, because, no one knows where I live but you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, but, here it is. I'm going to file the divorce. I had already made him sign a temporary, legal separation agreement. Mm-hmm. That was the advantage of working around a bunch of attorneys. I was able to write it up myself. They proof it. Right. And I was like, I'm going to go ahead and file for the divorce. It's time. We haven't been together for a year and a half. No, let's try to work this out. No, it's time. And that's all I told him. And then finally it was like irritating. I'm like, I'm just asking you to don't come down here and catch a felony, or better yet, don't make me catch one. And that was it. The very next weekend, he was scheduled to come in town. He's begging, pleading for us to work things out. Nope, I'm good. I was like, I'm filing it my first check in September. Mm-hmm. The 8th of September, it was a Friday night. I had a busy day. I was the statistician for the football team. And while at the game, my youngest son ended up bumping his head with another kid playing around. The team doctor on the field was like, he's going to need stitches. So after game's over, I spent all night in children's. Mm-hmm. So I got no sleep. But the doctors cleared him to play his Little League game on Saturday. So I spent the whole day at the field on Saturday. I also did stats for the semi-pro team. They called me. I was supposed to have that day off, but they called me. Miss, can you come fill in? So I ended up going out to Dublin to do the stats for their game. Me and my girlfriend was supposed to go out that night because we had a friend that was coming in from out of town. a girlfriend that was coming from out of town. So we were already scheduled to go out that night. I get home to think, okay, I got to get some sleep before I go out. But she calls me, hey, we're going to go out to eat beforehand. Get ready. So at this point, I gotten like 2 hours of sleep. But I get ready, go out. I'm with her, from like 7 o'clock that evening. And we club hopped downtown. I actually drove my van to one club. We ended up hopping in her car, club hopping the rest of the night. I didn't get home till like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Finally lay down to get some sleep, but there was a basketball tournament that my son wanted to go to. So I'm up and out of the house by 11 o'clock that morning to go over to a basketball tournament. Finally get home that evening, cook dinner, doing laundry, which seemed like my favorite pastime. He called me while I was folding laundry. I asked him, hey, I'm like, let me call you back. I can't hold the phone, fold this laundry. I remember him asking me, are you going out tonight? I'm like, I don't know. I may, but I'm trying to get through this laundry. So let me call you back. Earlier that Sunday, while I was actually at the basketball tournament, I was talking to him on his work phone because he would call me on his cell because he was asking, how the boys did in their games, how my youngest son's head was with the stitches, all this other type of stuff. And so what he would usually do when we would talk, he would call me on the cell phone, but he couldn't walk around his job on his cell phone. So he asked me to call his work phone.
Mm-hmm.
And we would talk while he was on his work phone. So I knew he was at work.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, this is like noon Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't think that much about it. So when he called me, so of course, like I said, we had a cell phone. And I had a cell phone on the same plan as mine for him. So the kids could call him on, a local number.
Sure.
Anytime. That night, it's after 11. I'm folding laundry. I'm watching TV. I dozed off. My son said he heard me scream. And initially, he thought I was screaming at the television because it's just what I do. Because most likely I was watching a game. And then he said he heard me scream the second time. And he was like, that ain't no yelling at the television screen. At this point, I had woke up and the only thing I could see was red and orange flashes. I really couldn't see anything. And I started moving around. And so when my son heard me scream the second time, I had made my way to the hallway because I was in the family room in the back of the house. My kids, youngest two, were asleep near me, like 5 feet away from me. Like, remember, I said we made it work. So we made a bed, set up a bed for them in the family room. And when I started moving, I moved to the hallway. My son was in the living room in the front of the house. And he said when he got up, he could see the flames reflecting off of the wall. My 15-year-old son,
Flames. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
He could see flames
He
like
saw
fire on the wall.
He went to come up the center hallway.
Okay.
He ended up meeting me there in, like I said, when I came from the family room, he ended up meeting me there, in the hallway, and I was on fire. Of course, this is all secondhand information that I was told. Like I said, I remember moving around, and then next thing, my son pushed me out the front door, past his twin sister, who was out on the porch because they were actually on fall break from school. Pushed me past her, rode me around in the ground, got the garden hose to put the flames out, and then ran back into the house to see what started the fire. Because remember, my youngest two were there in the same room with me.
Yes. Okay.
So he went in and got them, and my brother ended up coming downstairs. Remember, this is like after 11:30 at night at this point.
Mhm.
They had already gone to bed, but they come downstairs. My brother is now kneeling next to me. I hear my daughter on the phone. My mom is on fire. She was on phone with 911. Neighbors start coming across the street. They obviously had told my daughter or someone to put a wet sheet over me. I'm crying. I remember going up to my head like this, and that's when I realized my hair was gone. And my brother's crying, kneeling next to me. Um, they put that wet sheet over me, and I remember screaming at them, get it off, because it was excruciating pain, painful.
Mhm.
My neighbors come across, they're trying to figure out what's going, everybody's trying to get on. They got the kids out the house and put them into the car on the far side of the driveway so they couldn't see me, because like my van was like closest to the door. Um, I remember the paramedics, and I don't know if it was the firemen or the paramedics, someone in uniform running into my house, and my brother screaming, "Get out here and help my sister." So
Mhm.
they didn't see me. I was at this point laying face down in the front yard. I remember them coming back out onto the porch, but the last thing I told my brother was like, "I can't see. I can't see." And I blacked out. And so I um I was told later that I told them in the ambulance on the way to the hospital about a lamp falling on me. I remember when I woke up, there was a lamp leaning against me, just on the side table.
Mhm.
But what they determined is that it probably was leaning against me when I jumped up.
Mhm.
But I thought, the lamp must have, in my mind, I'm thinking the lamp must have set the clothes on fire, which set me on fire.
Mhm.
Well, I flatlined once in the ambulance. At this point, my daughter had called my dad. They were actually on their way home and didn't realize that the fire chief racing past them was going to their house. When they got to the house, my mom told me when they pulled up to the house, the ambulance was taken off with me. And they were actually on their way to take my dad's best friend home because they had been at church and everything else like that. They hang, they was they hung out.
Mhm.
And my best friend ended up driving my dad to the hospital, and my mom stayed there at the house trying to figure out what started this fire.
Mhm.
I flatlined 2 more times in the emergency room. They got to the hospital. Everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. They said my sister was feeling helpless because she was living in Atlanta at the time. So she actually was calling my ex because he actually called my daughter. "Hey, I'm trying to get a hold of your mom. Where's she at?" And that's when she tells him, "She's on fire. She's on fire." And he's, "I'm on my way." And everybody's thinking he's driving from Chicago.
Mhm.
My sister is calling him, trying to, make sure he stayed calm. Well, of course, they induced me into the coma. At that point, they said, determined that I had third-degree burns on 33% of my body. Essentially, I had on a tank top and jeans. So the skin that was exposed, including my face, my head, my hands, my arms, is what got burnt. And they said I probably had my arms folded. I remember I dozed off to sleep. It wasn't like I was laying down.
Right.
But I was in the coma for 27 days, 26, 27 days. When I woke out of the coma, The investigators came to the hospital the day after to ask me questions about what I remembered. And once again, I talked about the lamp.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, they were like, yeah, no, miss, it wasn't the lamp. We're about to go arrest your husband. Remember, I never got a chance to file,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but he was still my husband.
Mm-hmm.
He was still my next of kin. So when he got to the hospital around 6 o'clock that morning, they said my dad went after him. He's like, I know you had something to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to get separated, everything. My dad actually ended up had to file a temporary protection order against my ex-husband for himself. So my dad was like, as long as I'm near her, he can't be near her.
Mm-hmm.
Because the hospital couldn't legally keep him from seeing me because he was my next of kin.
Even after the police got involved?
Well, that was just it. It was like this was the beginning of the investigation.
Got you. Okay, I got you. I got you. Okay.
And, I didn't, no one saw him do it. So they had to do an investigation. It was my mom's family plan that we were on. So she gave them permission to run the cell phone records.
Mm-hmm.
But it was going to take a few days. At this point, he's there. His parents end up coming, but my parents would not allow anybody near me.
Mm-hmm.
A nurse, though, there were some crossing times. They told me a nurse was in my room and he ended up coming in there. And the nurse overheard him say, "Why'd you make me do this?" And so the nurse just kind of stuck around. But for HIPAA laws, she couldn't really say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but that's when they were like, hired security. My family hired security for my room. And then the police now wanted to talk to him, but he kept missing these set times.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to talk to him and then actually checked himself into Upham Hall, which is the maternity ward at OSU.
Maternity ward?
I mean, not maternity,
Like mental health ward?
mental health ward.
Got you. Okay.
And so because he checked himself in, he was allowed to check himself out.
Mm-hmm.
When he checked himself out, his parents just drove him back to Chicago before the police had a chance to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
But they were able to impound his car, which was there in the OSU garage while he had checked himself in. And they found some evidence in the car. So when they told me he did it, that he was the one who did it, everyone's looking around me, wondering what my reaction was going to be. And the one thing I said was like, I didn't think he had the balls to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I spent the next 3 months in the hospital. I got out a week before Christmas. I had to go right back in right after New Year's for another surgery. One of the first things I had to do was now fight for custody because he convinced his parents to file for custody of the two children we shared. So I had to deal with that. Um, they finally, it's like, well, we don't want custody. We just want to make sure we got, we can see our grandkids. And I called their bluff. I'm like, you can come see them anytime you want. He finally, like I said, he was arrested. Like I say, in October, he initially tried to fight extradition, but he's finally brought to Columbus in November. Keep in mind, I'm still in the hospital during this time. They came to me in June. This is now 2007. It was September 10th of 2006 when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
The night of September 10th. By June of next year, the prosecutors are contacting me about, offering him a plea. And I really felt compelled to take the plea. that they were offering.
What was the plea they were offering?
Well, they were like, if they went with any more than 20 years, his attorney would tell him to go to trial. Here's the kicker when it comes to trial. I've sat on a couple of juries and was a jury foreman on a DV charge, actually, and a aggravated murder charge. They're very unreliable because they're just people. I was, so I didn't trust the jury because no one saw him. I didn't.
If you don't mind, Miss, back up a second. How did he? So how did he get in the house?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So during the investigation, my dad, off of the family room, we had sliding glass doors to go to the backyard.
Okay,
Well, attached, of course, to the house, there was a Florida room, a four-season room.
okay.
And there was a hot tub over in the corner of that room. They come realize that he had taken the locks off of the windows over by the hot tub. That sliding glass door was like the only windows to the yard. There was no other, where you could see into the yard.
Mm-hmm.
So where he took the locks off, you would literally have to go over there, to look. And like I said, it was over where the hot tub was set in the corner. And they realized that the locks had been taken off. And they speculate that when he came in that week before is when he took those locks off.
So basically, he came in
Landed.
and set you on fire
And then went right back out the.
while two of your kids were laying there.
Mind you. His children were 5 feet away from me. He had to step over his children to set me on fire, had to step back over them to leave. I touched the bed when I got up. I actually touched the bed where they were sleeping and set that mattress on fire.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that was how he got in. They
Okay.
also had found a book bag that had like a beer and a cigar. He didn't smoke. In a book bag that was thrown on the roof of the Florida room.
Mm-hmm.
But then they got the phone records. And the phone records is what determined that he was indeed in Columbus.
Because of the pinging.
The king. Remember, I told you how my sister was calling him because she was feeling helpless because she couldn't get a flight until the next morning. Mm-hmm. They didn't expect me to make it through the night anyway.
Right.
But so she's calling him, making sure he's driving safely.
Right.
From Chicago. And every time she called, it was pinging off the towers all around 270.
Gotcha.
And then when he called my daughter, he is actually right up by Easton. My dad lived right off of Cassidy.
Okay. And for those who don't know, so people watching this from all over, that's not that. That's probably 7 minutes drive. Cassidy and 270 is probably 7 minutes drive from Easton.
Yeah. What they determined was that when he called my daughter to see where I was, it pinged off a tower 6 minutes from my dad's house, 6 minutes after the 911 call went out.
Okay.
And then they said when they followed the pings with my, sister and why he was on the phone talking to actually this girlfriend that he supposedly had in Chicago, it was pinging off towers all around Columbus. They said he probably looped 270 10 times, drove out to the Ohio, almost to near the Ohio-Indiana border, and then drove back in. And so they said he got to the hospital right around 6 o'clock that morning.
He tried to time it out as if he was driving from Chicago.
Exactly. And but once they got the towers and were determined that he was indeed in Columbus, that's when they were arresting him, but he had already went back to Chicago with his parents. So they notified Chicago police to keep an eye on him. They went to Chicago. And I remember his mom was very combative about, because they had a search warrant for his parents' house and for his best friend's house that he was living at, that he had moved into after his parents actually kicked him out. And part of the reason he's kicked him out because they start seeing some of that side of him that I tried to tell them about. So they had search warrants. I remember the investigator told me how they were ready to arrest his mom because she kept getting in the way. He couldn't have done this. He kept her on this pedestal because they really disliked me. She really disliked me. And she disliked me for the sole fact that I stole her baby. I'm like, I have been trying to give your baby back to you for years.
How did he set you on fire, miss?
Lighter fluid. He actually put some lighter fluid into this flask that his roommate owned. He bought the materials at his job at Menards using his employee discount. They have surveillance of him purchasing the items at the register. In Menards, he bought some gloves, the lighter fluid, one of those, like long handled lighters that you like use for barbecue, that type thing.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yep. He bought one of those and some snacks on the receipt.
I mean, you got to have something to eat if you're going to burn someone and you're going to drive.
Other kicker. Here's the other kicker. They also found out through the phone records that he was coming in town way more than we thought he was.
So, yeah, thus the stalking.
Yes, he was still stalking me, even from Chicago. Yeah. We also found out he came in town. He bought that stuff on Thursday. He came in town on Saturday. Remember, I told you I went out with my girlfriend Saturday night?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was going all over Columbus looking for me Saturday night, but had to leave because he had to be at work.
Back to work, yeah.
On Sunday morning. And his brother actually asked him to come to his house Sunday evening. So, because his brother was like, you need to let this go. She's just asking for the divorce. She ain't like she taking away for kids. I didn't even ask for child support. Mm-hmm. And his brother, wanted him to come over when he got off work that Sunday. And come to find out, he got off work and had been in town since like 8:00 that evening on Sunday. When he was calling me, he was already in Columbus. He had to have been sitting in the backyard of my dad's house because remember, I did not go to sleep. I dozed off to sleep in the family room. I had a bedroom upstairs. Mm-hmm. So he had to just been watching me from the backyard, waiting to see if I would go to sleep. Or, for him to sneak into the house. So there was a lot of circumstantial evidence against him, but no one saw him do it. And that is the part that made me nervous about going in front of a jury.
Gotcha. Understandable. Okay.
Also, the children would have had to testify against him. Mm. I did not want to put my children in. They were 15, 6, and 7. I did not want to put them in that situation. Mm-hmm. He had legally established paternity for my twins. Mm-hmm. It had his name. Yeah. I did not want them to have to go through that. So the prosecutors were like, well, if we offer him more than 20, his attorney will tell him to go to trial. Keep in mind, he was never looking at life.
Mm-hmm.
The only way he was looking at life is if I died.
Mm-hmm.
Really weird, because just recently, when I had to file for the protection order, I got a copy of the case file. They actually wrote up the charges as if I died, because the investigator told me, he was like, I kept a picture of you in the state that you were in on my desk, praying that God would take you. And we were preparing for a death penalty case, because they were like, if you died, we were filing for it was going to become a death penalty case for him.
What was he charged with ultimately, or what was he
Uh,
convicted?
he was charged with multiple, but he ended up pleading guilty to attempted murder, aggravated arson, aggravated burglary, since he broke into the house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what they did was they offered him 17. I mean, no, they offered him 18 or something like that. And his attorney countered with 17. But I was like, no, he gets 17 plus the time served or something like that. Maybe they offered him 20. And
Mm-hmm.
then his attorney came back with 17. And they were like, 17. And they came back with that counter offer to me. And I'm like, he gets 17, but he gets no jail credit. So they rounded it up to the 18.
Sure. Okay.
And that's how he was sentenced to 18 years. Um, Ohio doesn't have laws where you get like out for, for good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You serve the whole sentence. But what I found out recently was that they do have, oh shoot, um, they do have programs in prison where he was getting jail time credit, because I started noticing that his date kept changing of him getting out.
Mm-hmm.
He got out September 20th of last year,
Of 2024.
of 2024. That sent me down a whole spiral.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in that it was, it sent me down a spiral. I thought I was over it. I had been living my best life,
Mm-hmm.
as you were, able to see. I was living my best life. Um, when it came to why he was out. And part of that was because I didn't have to worry about him. I didn't have to worry about him showing up anywhere. So there was a certain level of security that I had.
Mm-hmm.
But then the reality of him getting out was, what kind of life am I going to have? I was initially told I wasn't going to get the restraining order, the protection order, because it had been so long.
Hmm.
So there was just a lot of different stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of different emotions I went through. I contemplated suicide last summer because I just didn't want to feel that way anymore. That fear, that insecurity, it took me right back to when we were still together.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of counseling, great friends, and a supportive family. I had to fight my way through that. But I did get the protection order from the judge, because he was still trying to justify it to the children. The children had actually talked to him and had talked, conversations with him, the youngest two. And, This was biologically their father. But they've had conversations with him, and my son actually asked him, well, how did y'all even get to that point? And, they were 24 and 25, at this time. And he like, how did you get to that point? And he tried to say, well, there was infidelity on both sides. She went out with your football coach. And I'm like, huh? He was actually, now the attack happened in 2006. We didn't get married until 2000. And he was referencing a date that I went on with a coworker in 1997 or 8. And my son wasn't even born until 1999.
So even after all those years in prison, he's the same cat.
Yeah. And that was just that he's still trying to justify what he did. And for that reason, the judge was like, how long you want this protection order? And the max that they can give you is 5 years for the protection order. And he's like, and come back and see me in 4.5 and we'll renew this. So I did get the protection order. He's serving he's on probation or whatever it's called, post-release supervision. Supposed to be for 2 years. I'm sorry, supposed to be for 5 years. I found out that if he does everything he's supposed to do, they can actually let him off after a year.
Mm-hmm.
But he's serving it in Chicago. He has no family here. He has no friends. There's probably, somebody who still wants to hurt him walking around my city.
Sure.
But he's serving it there. And for some, they thought, well, at least he's there. I'm like, but he was there when the attack happened too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that doesn't give me a lot of comfort unless we build some, a moat with some dragons between here and Chicago that I control. That doesn't give me a lot of comfort in knowing, other than the fact that he will violate that post release if he leaves the state.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he doesn't notify them. But from my understanding, also, the kids were considered victims as well. And so he's not even able to contact them now that he's out,
Mm-hmm.
which they're fine with, because they had actually, when my son cut him off after that, she went out with your coach.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, I'm done. And my daughter, the same. She was like, he was still trying to justify what he did. So she ended up doing the same in the sense of cutting him off last, because he's still very manipulative. That was the other thing, that he's still completely manipulative in the sense of telling people, what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to convince people of his side.
Mm-hmm. As if he had a side.
As if he had a side. If anything, I'm like, I remind people, I don't care if I was dancing on tables.
Right. Right. 100%.
Nothing justifies setting someone on fire. And so it's been a lot. Sorry, I'm changing.
I know. Yeah, I know. You got something to do. I
Okay.
know. I know.
So it's been a lot, to get through it. Like I said, a lot of counseling, the supportive some really good friends. Um, I'm still working, on it, working on myself, especially after that dark time that I had last summer. Um, Sadly, though, I'm never going to, because of what someone else did, I am never going to be debt free. Um, because I will forever, I got the life sentence, as I put it to people.
Yeah.
And my first bill, sorry, the first bill I got from the hospital was $980,000. The last that we had calculated, I've had almost 40 surgeries in total that were just burn related. Um, the last burn related surgery I had, which was started the spiral that I went down on, in last year, was that I had to have two different, well, we tried one surgery. I had to have two burn related surgeries last year. He's about to get out and I'm still having surgeries trying to fix what he did.
Yeah. Look, Miss, I want you to hold off right there. If it's okay with you, I know you got
Uh-huh.
some place to be. We talked about that offline. Would you mind if we continue this um later?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
because I want to know, I think it's important. First of all, thank you for sharing what you've shared, but I'm really interested in this process that you've been dealing with, like post that, in this journey.
Yeah.
Uh, Also because, again, like kind of like I talked about earlier when we first got on, man, there's so many women are dealing with this every day. Yours case obviously a very extreme one in terms of the ramifications and the results, but I think it's just more to be said. I think you have more to say. Uh, I can tell my audience that I have a list of questions. I may not even get to them
Okay.
on the second one, but this did not go the way I expected it to go. But
I'm sorry.
no, 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 no. That is not an apology thing. It's not an apology thing. It's just that we never talked about it. So I was coming at it from a different perspective. You didn't do anything wrong. What I'm saying is your story is so amazing that none of the stuff I wrote even applies. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So it's nothing for you to
Oh,
apologize about.
okay.
It's you didn't do anything. No, you're fine. What I'm saying is your story is so incredible that the only way was going to be told was if you told it the way you did. So for that, again, I thank you. I know you got someplace to be. I'm going to let you get to that place. We're gonna come
Okay.
back in the next few days or so. You and I text, we'll talk and get together, and
Okay.
we'll finish part two of this. So
Okay.
I want to thank you for your time, Miss. Uh, we'll talk later. Uh, for real though, show audience, you already know. Again, this is my heart to
All
make a
right.
difference, and she's making a difference. And yeah, I'm kind of speechless right now, so I'm just gonna let it go at that.
All right.
Y'all stay safe.
Okay.
All right now.
All right. Thanks.